In a small, quiet town, there lived a young girl named Sophie, barely scraping by. She worked part-time at a local diner, helping her struggling mother keep the bills paid. Life had always been hard for Sophie, but she never complained. Her mother had raised her to always show kindness, no matter the circumstances. Sophie often found herself walking home late at night, her only company the flickering streetlights that lined the roads of Ashford, a sleepy little town where nothing ever seemed to change. Welcome back to my channel. If you're enjoying this story, make sure you subscribe and leave a like. Your support means the world. Now let's dive back into this unforgettable tale. One cold evening, as Sophie was walking home after finishing her shift at the diner, she noticed a man sitting on the sidewalk near a small alleyway. His clothes were ragged, his face hidden by the shadows, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Most people would have walked right past him, too busy with their own lives to notice the man in need. But Sophie wasn't most people. Without thinking, Sophie approached the man, her heart full of compassion. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. The man looked up at her, his eyes tired, but there was something striking about him, something she couldn't place. "I'm fine, just need a little help," he muttered, his voice raspy, as he looked down at his hands. Sophie didn't hesitate. She reached into her purse and pulled out the little bit of cash she had left from her shift. "Here," she said, handing him the money. "It's not much, but it'll help you get something to eat." The man looked at her, surprise flashing across his face. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice a little stronger now. "I know," Sophie smiled, "but everyone deserves a little help sometimes." Without another word, Sophie offered him a warm smile and started to walk away. But the man suddenly called out to her, his voice a bit firmer now. "Wait," he said. "Thank you. I'll never forget your kindness." Sophie turned back to him. But before she could say anything else, the man stood up slowly, his tired body lifting with an air of authority she hadn't noticed before. There was something about him that suddenly seemed different. "I don't want to be a burden," he continued, looking at Sophie with gratitude in his eyes. "But do you think you could spare a little space for me tonight? Just to rest a little? I don't want to cause trouble." Sophie hesitated. She had always been cautious, especially with strangers. But something about this man felt different. His tone was sincere, and his face, though worn, seemed to carry a weight of life experience. "All right," Sophie said, making her decision. "You can stay for tonight, but just tonight. I'll make you a cup of tea." They both walked to her modest apartment, a small place on the edge of Ashford, where Sophie lived alone with her mother. The building wasn't much to look at. Old, run down, but it was home. Sophie offered the man a seat at the small kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared a cup of tea. The man thanked her once again, sitting quietly as he glanced around the small room. It wasn't long before Sophie excused herself and went to bed. She didn't think much more about the man. He was just another stranger, someone she had helped out of kindness. Little did she know that this simple act of compassion would change her life forever. Later that night, as Sophie slept, the man stood by her window, looking out over the city. The faint glow of the streetlights illuminated his face, and as he stared into the distance, his thoughts were interrupted by the sudden realization that Sophie had no idea who he truly was. He wasn't just some random beggar. He was Alexander Williams, the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the country. A man worth millions, hiding behind a facade for reasons he couldn't explain. Sophie had shown him a kindness that no one in his world ever had. And for that, he couldn't help but feel a deep, unsettling sense of gratitude. And something more. He knew what he had to do next. But he wasn't sure how Sophie would react. What would happen when Sophie found out the man she had taken in was not just some homeless man, but a millionaire CEO with a world of power at his fingertips? Stay tuned. The story's only just begun. As the morning sun crept through the blinds, Sophie awoke to the smell of fresh coffee. For a moment, she wondered if she was dreaming. But as she stretched and looked around, she saw that the small kitchen was bathed in warm sunlight. To her surprise, the man, Alexander, was standing by the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He was no longer the tired, ragged stranger from the night before. Now he looked different, more composed, as if the weight of the world had been momentarily lifted off his shoulders. Sophie rubbed her eyes and sat up, still groggy from the night. "I didn't expect you to still be here," she said, her voice still sleepy, but grateful for his quiet presence. Alexander turned around, offering her a smile that seemed too warm for a man who had been living on the streets. "I hope you don't mind," he said, his voice soft but with a certain charm. "I thought I'd make you breakfast. I can't thank you enough for letting me stay." Sophie hesitated for a moment. She had never been the kind of person to trust strangers easily, yet there was something in Alexander's eyes that made her feel at ease. He wasn't the man she had thought he was. There was a depth to him, something hidden behind his tired eyes, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. "No, of course I don't mind," Sophie replied, slowly getting out of bed and walking over to the kitchen. She had never had anyone make her breakfast before. It was a small gesture, but for some reason, it felt meaningful. As Sophie sat at the table, Alexander placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of her. She could tell that he wasn't just any ordinary person, but she still didn't understand why he had chosen her of all people to help. Why would a man with such a life of luxury and success be sitting in her small apartment, making her breakfast? She took a bite, still eyeing him curiously. "So, what's your story? I mean, I know you said you were down on your luck, but why were you out there like that?" Alexander's eyes darkened slightly at her question, but he quickly recovered, a faint smile returning to his face. He sat across from her, leaning back in his chair, his demeanor calm. "Life has a way of throwing curveballs at you. Sometimes, you just have to weather the storm." He paused, his gaze momentarily shifting to the window, as if lost in thought. "I've made some mistakes in my life. Maybe I'm still trying to fix them." Sophie noticed the shift in his tone. It was as if he was hiding something deep and painful. But she didn't press him. She knew better than to pry into someone's past. There was something about Alexander that made her want to learn more, but she respected his boundaries. As the morning went on, they talked about everything and nothing. Sophie felt a strange sense of connection with him. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, made her feel like she was talking to someone much more important than a random stranger. There was an underlying warmth in his eyes, something familiar and yet so foreign at the same time. But then, just as quickly as the connection grew, Sophie's mind began to cloud with doubts. Why had he stayed? Why did he help her? Was he really just a man down on his luck? Or was there something more to him that he wasn't sharing? As she pondered these thoughts, Alexander suddenly stood up, breaking her train of thought. "I need to leave," he said quietly, gathering his things. "Thank you again, Sophie. You've done more for me than anyone else ever has." Sophie stood as well, surprised by how quickly he was leaving. "Wait. You don't have to go. You can stay a little longer if you want." He paused at the door, turning to look at her. There was something in his gaze that made Sophie's heart flutter. Something intense. Something real. "I appreciate your kindness," he said softly. "But I have to go now." Before Sophie could say anything else, Alexander left, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Sophie stood there for a moment, unsure of what had just happened. She couldn't deny the way her heart had raced when he looked at her, the way he made her feel seen, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Little did Sophie know, Alexander wasn't leaving for good. There was something she didn't understand yet, something he had planned to reveal. The truth was, Sophie had done more than just offer him a place to stay. She had unknowingly given him a glimpse of the life he had longed for but had been too afraid to chase. An ordinary life, free from the chains of his wealth, his responsibilities, and the pressures of his high-powered world. What Sophie didn't know was that Alexander had been watching her from the moment he stepped into her life, and his feelings for her were far from simple. Stay tuned. The next chapter is where everything changes. Days passed, and Sophie tried to go back to her routine, but something was different. She couldn't shake off the feeling that her encounter with Alexander had changed her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. She hadn't seen him since he left that morning, but his presence lingered in her mind, like a whisper in the back of her thoughts. She wondered why he had acted so strange, so distant, despite the connection they had shared. Her curiosity gnawed at her. Sophie had helped him, yes, but there was a part of her that wanted to know more about him. What was it about his eyes that made her feel like she was seeing a completely different man than the one who had arrived at her door? It was just another regular morning when Sophie received a phone call that would turn her world upside down. Her phone rang as she was getting ready for work. The name flashing on the screen was unfamiliar. She hesitated for a moment before answering, her heart suddenly racing. "Hello?" A smooth, confident voice greeted her from the other end. "Sophie, it's Alexander. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Her breath caught in her throat. It was him. Her heart skipped a beat, and she suddenly felt both nervous and excited. "Alexander," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's going on? I didn't expect to hear from you." "I know I left rather abruptly the other day," Alexander continued, his tone apologetic but still full of an underlying calm. "But I've been thinking about you since. I wanted to invite you to dinner tonight. I owe you more than just a quick goodbye." Sophie's mind raced. A dinner invitation? This was not what she had expected. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and confusion. What did he want from her now? Was he genuinely interested in getting to know her better, or was there something else he wasn't telling her? "Dinner?" Sophie repeated, trying to wrap her head around the idea. "Why?" "Because I owe you more than just a thank you, Sophie," Alexander replied, his voice deepening with sincerity. "You've done more for me than you know, and I can't just walk away without showing my appreciation." Sophie stood there, staring at the phone, unsure of what to say. She wasn't sure what he was expecting, or what she was expecting, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. There was something about Alexander that she couldn't ignore, a magnetic force that made her want to know him, even if it meant stepping into unknown territory. "Okay," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll meet you tonight." The line went quiet for a moment before Alexander's voice returned, warmer this time. "Thank you, Sophie. I'll pick you up at 7. As Sophie hung up the phone, a wave of emotions rushed over her. What had she just agreed to? She had no idea what Alexander was up to, but there was something in her gut telling her that this dinner would change everything. What Sophie didn't know, however, was that this was no ordinary dinner. Alexander had planned something more than just a simple meal. He wasn't just some random stranger who had fallen on hard times. He was a man with a past, a man with power, and he had chosen Sophie for a reason that would slowly unfold as the evening went on, unraveling mysteries and secrets that Sophie could never have anticipated. As the sun set and the clock neared 7, Sophie couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation in the air. She had no idea what awaited her, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. Little did she know, Alexander's true identity, the truth he had been keeping from her, was about to come to light. The dinner would not only reveal the man behind the mask, but also the hidden truths of what was to come. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where everything Sophie thought she knew gets flipped upside down. Sophie stood in front of her mirror, nervously adjusting her dress. It was a simple, elegant black dress, but somehow tonight, everything felt different. She had no idea what she was getting into, but the butterflies in her stomach were undeniable. She glanced at the clock. It was almost 7. Just as she was about to grab her coat, she heard a knock on the door. Her heart skipped a beat. It was him. She opened the door to find Alexander standing there, dressed in a sharp black suit that fit him perfectly. His presence was commanding, yet there was something about him that softened the air between them, like he wasn't just another businessman. For a moment, they both stood there, almost as if neither knew what to say next. "Good evening, Sophie," Alexander said, his deep voice filling the space. He gave her a soft smile, his eyes studying her intently. "You look beautiful." Sophie's face flushed. She wasn't expecting such a compliment, and yet she felt herself drawn to him more than ever before. She could see that he was different, but still, there was something unsettling about his calm demeanor. His eyes seemed to hide something powerful, maybe dangerous, but at the same time she couldn't resist the pull. "Thank you," Sophie said, trying to sound more composed than she felt. "You look very handsome yourself." Alexander's lips curled into a small, knowing smile as he offered her his arm. "Shall we?" Without saying another word, they both stepped into the night, the cool air brushing against their skin. As they made their way to the car, Sophie couldn't help but wonder about the man standing next to her. He was a mystery she couldn't solve, and she was beginning to realize that she didn't want to. The car ride to the restaurant was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Sophie couldn't stop stealing glances at him, trying to piece together the enigma that was Alexander. Every time their eyes met, there was a brief moment where the world seemed to stop, as if the connection between them was undeniable. Finally, they arrived at a luxurious, dimly lit restaurant, the kind of place Sophie would never imagine herself stepping into. It was elegant, with gold accents, crystal chandeliers, and soft music filling the air. She felt out of place, but Alexander seemed completely at ease, as if this was where he belonged. They were escorted to a private table in the back of the restaurant, away from prying eyes. Alexander pulled out her chair for her, a small, yet meaningful gesture that caught Sophie off guard. She sat down, unsure of what to expect next, but the tension in the air was palpable. Alexander settled into his chair, his gaze never leaving Sophie. He ordered a bottle of wine and some appetizers, but Sophie's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't help but wonder what he was going to say. Why had he invited her here? What did he want from her? "Thank you for agreeing to meet me tonight," Alexander said, breaking the silence. "I've wanted to talk to you, Sophie. About everything." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About the truth," Alexander replied softly, his eyes darkening. "The truth about who I really am. The truth about why I came to you that night." Sophie's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about dinner anymore. She could feel it in the air, the tension building between them. Something was about to happen, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. Before she could respond, Alexander continued, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "I'm not who you think I am, Sophie. I haven't been honest with you." Her heart raced in her chest. What was he talking about? She wanted to ask, but the words caught in her throat. Alexander leaned in closer, his presence overwhelming. "The man you met that night, the beggar who you took in and cared for, he's not just a beggar. I'm a millionaire, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in this city." Sophie's eyes widened in disbelief. She couldn't process what he was saying. A millionaire? A CEO? It was impossible. She had seen him lying in the alley, looking like he had nothing. How could he possibly be who he said he was? "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. Alexander's expression softened. "I wanted to see if you would help me, without knowing who I was. I wanted to see if you could care for someone like me without any expectation. I wanted to see if you would love me for who I truly am, and not for what I have." Sophie sat there, stunned, trying to digest what he had just revealed. The man she had helped, the man who had slept on her couch, was not just any ordinary man. He was someone powerful, someone with wealth and influence, and yet he had chosen to live as a beggar, to test her kindness. "Why?" Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do something like that?" "Because I wanted to find someone who could see past all the money, past the status," Alexander said, his eyes intense. "And I think I've found her." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. Was he really saying what she thought he was saying? She didn't know what to feel: surprise, confusion, excitement. But one thing was for sure. Everything had just changed. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Sophie is forced to confront the truth about Alexander and her feelings for him. Sophie sat back in her chair, her mind spinning. She was still trying to make sense of everything that had just been revealed to her. A millionaire CEO? Alexander, the man she had taken in out of kindness, wasn't the struggling beggar she had assumed. He was someone powerful, someone used to a life of luxury, and yet he chose to test her, to see if she would offer her heart without any knowledge of who he truly was. For a moment there was silence between them. The clinking of cutlery, the soft murmur of other diners, and the faint sound of a piano playing in the background seemed distant as Sophie tried to find the right words. I don't know what to say. She finally managed to speak, her voice still shaken. I never imagined that. I mean, you were so... She paused, struggling to put her thoughts together. You looked so... different. And you never told me. Why? Alexander took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. I wanted to see if your kindness was genuine, Sophie. If you could look beyond appearances and see who I really am on the inside. And you did. You didn't know who I was, but you cared for me when no one else would. Sophie felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. But still, something was off. Something didn't sit right with her. But why test me like that? Why pretend to be someone else? I had to know, Alexander said softly. I needed to know if you could love me, not because of who I am, but because of who you saw in me. The words hung heavy in the air, and Sophie found herself at a crossroads. Could she understand why he had done this? Could she forgive him for the deception, the lies? She had trusted him, opened her heart to him without knowing who he was, and now he was telling her that it was all part of some twisted test. For a moment, Sophie looked down at her hands, unsure of how to proceed. Her heart ached, torn between the kindness she had shown him and the betrayal she now felt. She thought about everything they had shared, the late-night talks, the moments of vulnerability. And yet, the truth felt like a weight in her chest, one she wasn't sure she could carry. Alexander, I don't know if I can just move past this, Sophie admitted, her voice faltering. You lied to me. You made me believe one thing, and now it's all unraveling. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. The touch was warm, reassuring, but there was an undeniable tension between them. I understand why you're upset, he said quietly. I never wanted to hurt you, but I needed to know if you could love me for me. Not for the money, not for the status. I wanted to find out if your feelings were real. Sophie looked into his eyes, searching for the truth behind them. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that everything he had done was in pursuit of something pure. But the doubts lingered, gnawing at her. Could she truly move past the deception? Or would this always hang between them like an unspoken truth? I don't know what to say, Alexander, she replied, her voice filled with uncertainty. You've given me a lot to think about. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I can't take back what I've done, but I can promise you that I never meant for you to be hurt. I wanted to give you everything, to show you who I am, not just as a man of wealth, but as someone who wants to build something real with you. The words struck her deeply, and for a brief moment, Sophie felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crack. Could she forgive him? Could she allow herself to trust him again after everything that had happened? Before she could respond, Alexander added, I know it's hard to believe, but I didn't want you to love me because of what I have. I wanted you to love me because of who I am, and I'm willing to prove it to you, Sophie. The sincerity in his voice stirred something inside her, a glimmer of hope, perhaps. But was it enough to erase the doubts, the betrayal she felt? Sophie took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. This was the moment of truth. She had to decide if she could let go of her feelings of hurt and accept what Alexander was offering, or if the lies would be too much for her to overcome. You're asking me to trust you again, Sophie said quietly, her eyes meeting his. And I don't know if I can. But I'm willing to try. Alexander's face softened, a relieved smile crossing his lips. That's all I can ask for. As they sat there in the soft glow of the restaurant, Sophie realized that what had started as an unlikely encounter had now turned into something much more complicated. But in her heart, she couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them after all. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Sophie faces a difficult decision about her future with Alexander and whether she can truly let go of the past. Section 6. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of tension and hope. Sophie found herself constantly replaying her conversation with Alexander in her mind. His words, his promises, seemed so genuine. Yet the wound from the deception still stung. Could she really move past the lies? Was it possible to rebuild what had been broken? Or was it already too late? As much as she tried to focus on her work and daily life, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. Alexander's presence, which had once brought comfort, now felt like a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. She couldn't help but wonder if she was being naive, if she was allowing her emotions to cloud her judgment. But one thing was clear: her heart was torn. Despite everything, she still found herself drawn to him. His charm, his kindness, the way he had always treated her with respect. It all spoke to her deeply. And yet, there was the fear that if she gave in to her feelings, she might be setting herself up for more hurt. It was late one evening when Alexander called her again. His voice on the other end of the phone was soft, almost hesitant. "Sophie, can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat. She had been avoiding him the past few days, not out of anger, but out of uncertainty. She needed time to think, to make sense of everything. But now, hearing the vulnerability in his voice, she couldn't bring herself to ignore him. "I don't know if I'm ready for another conversation about all of this, Alexander," she replied, her voice tinged with both exhaustion and frustration. "I understand," he said quickly, "but please just hear me out. I want to make things right. I want to prove to you that my feelings are real." Sophie sighed, her mind clouded with conflicting emotions. But despite her hesitation, something inside her pushed her to agree. "Fine. We can talk. But I need to know that this time you're being honest with me. No more games, Alexander. I promise," he said, his voice earnest. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe the following afternoon, the kind of place Sophie often went to when she needed peace and reflection. The moment she walked in, she saw Alexander waiting at a corner table, his usual confidence replaced by an air of uncertainty. He looked up as she approached, his expression softening when he saw her. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, standing to greet her. There was no bravado, no cocky smile, just sincerity in his eyes. Sophie nodded, sitting across from him. She could see the exhaustion in his face, the same way she felt on the inside. They both knew this wasn't just another casual conversation. It was the moment that would determine everything. "I've been thinking about what you said," Sophie began, trying to steady her voice. "And I just don't know where to start. You said you wanted me to love you for who you are, not for what you have. But I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore." Alexander's gaze softened, and he took a deep breath. "I understand. And I'm sorry for the way I handled things. I wanted to protect you from the truth. But I see now that the truth is what matters most. I've been dishonest with you, and I regret that. But Sophie, what I said before was true. I care about you deeply, and I want to build something real with you." Sophie's heart raced as she listened to him, the vulnerability in his voice making it harder to hold on to her doubts. She had never imagined that someone like Alexander, a man of wealth and influence, would care so deeply about her. But the more he spoke, the more she felt the walls she had built slowly crumbling. "I've been thinking about what you said too," Sophie replied, her voice trembling. "And I want to believe you. But I can't just forget everything that's happened. It's hard to move past the lies. The hurt. It's still there." "I know," Alexander said softly. And I'm not asking you to forget, but I'm asking for a chance to show you who I really am. Not the CEO, not the man with all the wealth, but just me. The man who is falling in love with you. The words hit Sophie like a wave, crashing over her with unexpected force. Her heart, which had been so guarded, now felt open, vulnerable. Was it possible? Could she really allow herself to love him, despite the betrayal? For a moment, Sophie said nothing. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her, and the room around them seemed to fade. All she could focus on was the man sitting across from her, his eyes filled with genuine remorse and hope. I don't know what the future holds, Sophie finally said, her voice quiet but determined. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can make this work. Alexander's face lit up with a smile that took Sophie's breath away. Thank you, Sophie. You don't know how much this means to me. They sat in silence for a moment, the tension between them easing, replaced by the quiet understanding that they both had a long road ahead. But for the first time in days, Sophie felt a flicker of hope in her heart. Perhaps there was a chance for them after all. But as they both knew, love wasn't something that could be rushed. It would take time, trust, and the willingness to face the past together. And no matter how hard the road ahead seemed, Sophie couldn't help but believe that maybe, just maybe, it would all be worth it. The following weeks were a delicate dance of emotions and uncertainties for Sophie and Alexander. They met regularly, their meetings filled with a mixture of longing and hesitance, as both of them were unsure of where their relationship was headed. Every time they shared a conversation, it was clear that the spark was still there, yet the weight of the past lingered between them, like an unspoken barrier neither one could fully overcome. Sophie found herself torn in two directions, her heart wanting to trust Alexander again, to give him a chance to make things right, while her mind constantly reminded her of the pain his actions had caused. Could she truly let go of the past and step into a future with him? Or was she setting herself up for another heartbreak? One evening, as they sat together at a park near her apartment, Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts. Sophie, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking you to trust me again. I know it's hard, but I want to show you that I can be the man you deserve. Sophie looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of doubt. There was none. He was sincere. But even so, her heart was guarded. How can I trust you, Alexander? You've lied to me. I thought we had something real, something genuine, and then you hid the truth from me. How do I know you won't do it again? Alexander's shoulders slumped, and he exhaled deeply. I can't erase the past, Sophie. But I can spend every day showing you how much you mean to me. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right away, but just a chance to prove myself to you. I'm willing to work for it, if you'll let me. Her heart fluttered at his words, but her doubts remained. I don't know if I can just forget everything. I need time, Alexander. I need time to heal. I'll wait for you, he said softly, his voice unwavering. As long as it takes. I'll do whatever it takes to show you I'm serious. Sophie looked away, her gaze drifting to the setting sun, the golden light bathing the park in a soft glow. She had never imagined that a man like Alexander, who had everything, would ever be so vulnerable, so willing to fight for her. But then again, she had never imagined that love could come with so much pain. I need time to think, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I don't want to make a decision out of haste. I don't want to end up regretting it. I understand, Alexander said, reaching across the table to gently hold her hand. And I'm not rushing you. I'll be here when you're ready. Sophie didn't respond, but she allowed herself to sit in silence, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. For a moment, it felt like everything could be okay. But deep down, she knew the path to healing would be long and uncertain. Could she truly open her heart to him again? Could she trust that he was capable of loving her the way she deserved? As the days passed, Sophie's feelings remained tangled. Every time she saw Alexander, a part of her wanted to let go of the past and embrace the future, but another part of her still held on to the pain. She couldn't ignore the ache in her chest, the fear that if she let herself fall for him again, she would only be hurt once more. And yet, the pull between them was undeniable. Alexander was patient, attentive, and kind. His actions spoke louder than his words, and slowly, Sophie began to see the man he was becoming. But could a broken heart really heal? Or was she simply fooling herself into believing in something that might never be? The uncertainty loomed, casting a shadow over their growing connection. Neither of them knew where the future would lead. But as the days passed, one thing became clear. They were both willing to try, even if the road ahead was filled with obstacles and challenges. Sophie could only hope that, in time, she would find the strength to trust again. And maybe, just maybe, love would find a way to heal the wounds of the past. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sophie knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the same person who had first met Alexander. The journey ahead would be different, but whether it would lead to happiness or heartache, only time would tell. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of Sophie's decision grew heavier with each passing day. Alexander's presence in her life had become both a comfort and a challenge. He was there, patient and unwavering, yet Sophie still couldn't fully let go of the betrayal that had fractured their bond. The memories of the lies he had told her continued to haunt her thoughts, creeping in at the most unexpected moments. One evening, as Sophie sat alone in her apartment, the soft sound of the rain tapping against her window seemed to echo the turmoil inside her. She had spent the day with Alexander, and despite his kindness and unwavering dedication, there was still something holding her back. The lingering question of whether he could truly change gnawed at her. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed. A message from Alexander. "Sophie, can we meet tonight? There's something I need to say." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen him in a few days, and though she missed him, the thought of having another serious conversation made her uneasy. She hadn't been able to come to terms with what they were or where they were headed. Could one conversation change everything? Against her better judgment, Sophie agreed. Within an hour, she found herself sitting across from Alexander in a quiet cafe, the dim lighting casting a soft glow around them. The tension between them was palpable. She could see it in his eyes, the same pain, the same hope he had carried since that fateful day when he revealed the truth. "You wanted to talk?" Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander nodded, his gaze fixed on her. There was no arrogance in him now, no CEO confidence. Instead, there was a man who had been humbled by his actions and the love he was trying to hold on to. "Sophie, I've been thinking a lot. I know that words aren't enough anymore. I want to prove to you, not just tell you, that I'm worthy of your trust, but I know it's going to take time, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, no matter how long it takes." Sophie's eyes softened, but she still couldn't shake the doubt that lingered deep within her. "I don't know if I can just forget everything, Alexander. The hurt is still there, and every time I look at you, I'm reminded of what you kept from me." He reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered just above hers. "I'm not asking you to forget, Sophie. I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you that I'm not the man who lied to you. I want to be the man who loves you, the one who cherishes you, the one who makes up for all the mistakes I've made." Sophie closed her eyes, trying to suppress the tears that threatened to spill. She could feel the sincerity in his words, but her heart was still afraid of falling for him again, only to be hurt once more. But in that moment, she also realized that the only way to move forward was to take a leap of faith. If she didn't, she would never know what could have been. "I need to know that you're serious about this," Sophie whispered, her voice breaking. "I need to know that you'll fight for us, no matter what." "I will," Alexander replied immediately, his voice filled with conviction. "I'll fight every day, Sophie. I won't give up on you. Not now, not ever." A moment of silence passed between them. the weight of their unspoken words hanging in the air. Sophie looked into Alexander's eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she saw the man he truly was. Not the millionaire CEO, not the man who had lied to her, but the one who was willing to face the consequences of his actions and rebuild what they had lost. Slowly, Sophie reached out, her fingers brushing against his. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the beginning of something new, something fragile, yet full of potential. She was still scared, still uncertain, but she was willing to give him a chance. Because in her heart, she knew that love was never perfect. It was messy, it was complicated, and sometimes it took the most unexpected of circumstances to rebuild it. As they sat there, holding hands in the quiet cafe, Sophie realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward, one step at a time. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. And as the rain continued to fall outside, she knew that the road ahead would be difficult. But with Alexander by her side, perhaps it would be worth it. The days that followed felt like a delicate dance. One step forward, 2 steps back. Sophie couldn't deny that Alexander had changed. His actions spoke louder than any words could. He was there when she needed him, supportive, attentive, and patient. But the wounds of the past were not so easily healed. Every time she let her guard down, a wave of uncertainty would crash over her, reminding her of the trust she had once placed in him, only to see it shattered. One afternoon, as they sat together in her apartment, Sophie found herself staring out the window, lost in her thoughts. The city skyline outside seemed distant, as though her mind was miles away. She had never imagined that love could be so complicated, so full of contradictions. The man sitting next to her, the man who had once been her everything, was now a stranger in many ways. But in the quiet moments, when their eyes met, there was still something there. Something undeniable. Sophie. Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts. He was sitting beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. I know this isn't easy for you. I know that you're still hurting. And I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll never stop fighting for you, even if you don't see it yet. Sophie turned her gaze toward him, meeting his eyes. There was sincerity there, a depth of feeling that took her by surprise. It was as if the man she had once loved so deeply was finally standing before her again, vulnerable and raw. But could she trust him? Could she truly open her heart to him once more? I don't know, Alexander, Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can let myself love you again. I don't know if I can go through that kind of pain once more. Alexander's expression softened, and he reached out, gently cupping her face with his hand. I understand, and I won't rush you. I won't pressure you, but I promise you, I'm not the same man who hurt you. I'll prove it to you, every day, for the rest of my life. For a long moment, they simply sat in silence, the weight of their emotions filling the room. Sophie's heart ached as she felt the pull of their connection, but her mind was still filled with doubt. Could love truly overcome the scars of betrayal? Could they rebuild the trust that had been broken so violently? Just as Sophie was about to speak, her phone buzzed, breaking the tension. It was a text message from her best friend, Emma. Dinner at my place tonight? I think you need to get out of that apartment for a while. Sophie smiled softly, grateful for Emma's timely distraction. She turned to Alexander. I think I need some space, some time to think. He nodded, understanding the need for distance. Take all the time you need, Sophie. I'll be here when you're ready. As Sophie stood to leave, Alexander followed her to the door, his eyes never leaving hers. No matter what happens, Sophie, he said, his voice low and steady. I will always love you. The words hung in the air, a quiet promise. Sophie's heart fluttered at the sincerity behind them, but she still wasn't sure if she could believe them. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure if the uncertainty was something to be afraid of. Maybe, just maybe, It was the beginning of something new. She stepped out of the door, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. As she walked toward Emma's apartment, she couldn't help but feel that something had shifted. Whether it was hope or just the possibility of something better, Sophie didn't know, but she was willing to find out. And as she left the apartment behind, a small part of her began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future could be as beautiful as the love they had once shared. Section 10. Final section. Sophie's mind was a whirlwind as she made her way to Emma's apartment. She tried to focus on the steps in front of her, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Alexander. His words echoed in her ears, a constant reminder of the man he was now trying to become. Was it possible? Could she truly allow herself to fall for him again? The familiar warmth of Emma's apartment welcomed her as she stepped inside. The scent of dinner wafted from the kitchen, and the sight of her best friend bustling around put a temporary calm in her racing heart. Emma smiled brightly as Sophie entered, her eyes instantly picking up on the tension in Sophie's posture. "Hey, what's going on?" Emma asked, her voice soft and concerned. "You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Sophie sank onto the couch, her thoughts still a jumbled mess. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to find the right words. "I don't know, Emma. I don't know if I can trust him again. I want to, but I'm scared. I'm scared of getting hurt again." Emma sat down beside her, offering her a comforting presence. "I get it. But you need to trust yourself, Sophie. You know what's best for you. And if you still love him, then you have to at least give him the chance to prove that he's worthy of that love." Sophie nodded, feeling the weight of Emma's words sink in. She had always known that love was never easy, but it had never felt so complicated. But maybe, just maybe, the second chance she was considering was worth the risk. She had to believe that it was. Later that evening, Sophie returned home, her mind clearer than it had been all day. She opened the door to her apartment and was immediately met by the soft glow of the lights and the quiet stillness that seemed to fill the space. Alexander had been gone for hours, but the lingering presence of his love still seemed to surround her. She sat on the couch and pulled out her phone, hesitating for a moment before typing out a message. "Alexander, I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm willing to try. I want to see where this can go." The message sent, and for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt a sense of peace. She wasn't sure where this new journey would take her, but she was ready to walk it. She was ready to rebuild, not just with Alexander, but with herself as well. Moments later, her phone buzzed with his reply. "I'm ready to prove myself to you, one day at a time." A tear slipped down her cheek as she read the message. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect, but it was enough to give her hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, their love could survive the darkest of storms. As Sophie sat in the silence of her apartment, the weight of the past lifted slightly, and a new chapter began to unfold before her. She had taken the first step toward healing, toward rediscovering the love that had once been so pure. And with each passing day, she would find out just how strong the bond between them really was. Could they rebuild it, piece by piece?